The only good human is a dead human. The Adocian extremist's words dripped with venom as his blade sliced through the flesh of the helpless human diplomat. Ambassador Gabriel Reed collapsed to the floor, bleeding and barely clinging to life as the surprise attack on the human embassy continued. Zaxxas, the charismatic Adocian warlord leading the assault, stepped over the bodies of the slain humans, a cruel smile twisting his features. He would see every last human driven from Adocian space or killed, no matter the cost. For generations, the Adocian Empire had passed down an ancient, ominous warning: never, ever fight a human. Countless alien civilizations had witnessed firsthand the tenacity and unyielding nature of human warriors. When the expanding Terran Confederation first made contact with the Adocians, seeking trade and cooperation, many Adocian hardliners viewed the powerful humans as a threat to their way of life. Emperor Linux, the wise ruler of the Adocians, had pushed for a trade deal with humanity, seeing the benefits an alliance could bring. Just as an agreement was within reach, Zaxxas and his die-hard followers had launched their devastating surprise attack. Now, as news of the assault spread, shockwaves of fear and anger rippled through the human sphere of influence. The Terran Confederation condemned the attack as an act of war. They demanded justice and the immediate arrest of those responsible. Emperor Linux, desperate to avoid all-out war with the furious humans, ordered Zaxxas be brought to justice. But the warlord slipped through his grasp, escaping with loyal soldiers and several stolen Adocian warships. As Reed slowly recovered from his grievous injuries, he received new orders from Confederation High Command. Humanity was now at war with Zaxxas and his Adocian insurgents. Reed had a new mission: to coordinate the human military response as a senior advisor. The Adocians' ancient warning about fighting humans would now be put to the ultimate test as both civilizations teetered on the brink of a catastrophic interstellar conflict. The roar of human warships tearing through Adocian space shattered the fragile peace. Admiral Taras Vaxon stood on the bridge of his flagship, the TCS Invictus, as his fleet unleashed a storm of fire upon the rogue Adocian bases. The advanced human weapons sliced through the rebel defenses without difficulty, leaving smoldering ruins in their wake. On the surface of Eidos Prime, Ambassador Reed watched the blossoming fireballs of the human bombardment light up the night sky. He turned to Emperor Linux, his face etched with a mix of relief and concern. "Your Majesty, our forces are making swift progress against Zaxxas' faction. We've received reports of multiple high-ranking insurgents captured in the past few hours alone." Linux nodded, his expression grave. "That is good news, Ambassador. But Zaxxas himself remains at large. Until he is brought to justice, this conflict will continue to fester." Reed placed a reassuring hand on the Emperor's shoulder. "We'll find him, Your Majesty. You have my word." As the human offensive rolled onward, cracks began to form in Adocian society. In the streets of the capital, protesters clashed with security forces, some denouncing Zaxxas as a madman, others hailing him as a hero of Adocian independence. Whispers of discontent and unease spread like wildfire, as many Adocians grappled with the realization that their ancient warning had come to pass. They had dared to fight a human, and now they were paying the price. Emperor Linux, desperate to prevent the total collapse of his authority, reluctantly agreed to a series of demands issued by the Terran Confederation. Human military bases would be established on Adocian soil, while trade agreements heavily favoring human interests were signed into law. The concessions were a bitter pill for many Adocians to swallow, a humiliating surrender of their sovereignty to an alien power. Ambassador Reed watched the Adocian people struggle to come to terms with their new reality, a knot of unease twisting in his gut. The swift and devastating human response to the attack on the embassy had been a display of overwhelming force, but Reed couldn't shake the feeling that it was a sledgehammer used to crack a nut. How many innocent Adocians had been caught in the crossfire? How much more damage would be done before the conflict was through? In a darkened room, light years away, Zara Venix pored over stolen schematics of human warships, her eyes gleaming with a fanatic light. The brilliant Adocian scientist had already begun to gather a network of spies and informants throughout the Empire, all united in their hatred of the human invaders. Venix knew that the key to defeating the humans lay in understanding their weaknesses and she would not rest until she had unlocked every secret of their technology and tactics. As the shattered pieces of the Adosian Empire began to reform into a new and uncertain shape, the stage was set for a conflict that would shake the very foundations of the galaxy. The humans, flush with victory and convinced of their own righteousness, pressed forward into Adosian space, while the Adosians, their pride wounded but their drive unbroken, began to plot their revenge. The ancient warning had been ignored, and now the price would be paid in blood and fire. On the bridge of the Invictus, Admiral Vaxon stood watching the stars, a grim smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The Adosians had dared to challenge human supremacy, and they had been taught a sharp lesson. But Vaxon knew that this was only the beginning. The true test was yet to come, and he would be ready to meet it head-on. The taste of victory turned sour in Ambassador Reed's mouth as he watched the Adosian capital from his office window. What should have been a moment of triumph had become a powder keg of resentment and barely concealed hostility. "Another protest, sir," his aide reported, handing him a data pad. "This one outside the new human military base. The crowd's getting uglier by the minute." Reed's eyes scanned the report, his frown deepening. The concessions they'd forced from Emperor Linux were breeding a dangerous backlash. He tapped his comm unit. "Admiral Vaxon, we need to talk." Hours later, Reed found himself in a secure briefing room aboard the Invictus, facing the stern visage of Admiral Vaxon. "The situation's deteriorating faster than we anticipated," Reed began, pulling up hollow projections of recent intelligence. "Our heavy-handed approach may have won the battle, but we're losing hearts and minds down there." Vaxon's eyes narrowed. "You're not suggesting we loosen our grip, are you, Ambassador? These Adosians need to learn their place." Reed shook his head. "No, but we need to be smarter about this. My sources tell me there's a scientist named Zara Venix who's gaining influence. She's brilliant, ruthless, and utterly devoted to seeing us driven out of Adosian space." "One scientist is hardly a threat to our military superiority," Vaxon scoffed. "Don't underestimate her," Reed warned. "She's reportedly reverse engineering our tech, and she's got the ear of some powerful military leaders. We need to—" An alarm blared, cutting off Reed's words. Vaxon's comm crackled to life. "Admiral, we're picking up a massive energy surge from the planet's surface." Vaxon and Reed rushed to the bridge, arriving just in time to see a blinding flash of light erupt from the Adosian capital. When it faded, a smoldering crater stood where the human military base had been moments before. "By all that's holy," Vaxon breathed, his face ashen. "What was that?" Before anyone could respond, the main view screen flickered to life. A familiar face filled the screen, his eyes burning with triumph and hate. "Zaxus," Reed hissed. The Adosian warlord's voice boomed through the bridge. "Humans! You thought you had broken us, but you only made us stronger. The time has come for the Adosian people to reclaim their destiny." As Zaxus continued his fiery speech, Reed's mind raced. The ancient warning had been right. Fighting humans was a grave mistake. But now, it seemed, the humans had made an equally grave error in underestimating their foes. In the shadows of the Adosian Imperial Palace, Emperor Linux paced nervously. The hardliners were gaining ground, and he felt his control slipping away with each passing day. A soft chime announced a visitor. "Enter!" Linux called out, his voice weary. Zara Venix strode in, her eyes gleaming with terrifying excitement. "Your Majesty, I bring news that will change everything." As Venix laid out her plans for advanced weaponry and a bold offensive against the humans, Linux found himself nodding along. Perhaps this was the key to salvaging his legacy and restoring Adosian pride. "You have my authorization," Linux declared. "Begin the preparations at once." Venix bowed deeply, a triumphant smile playing at the corners of her mouth. As she turned to leave, Linux called out, "And Venix, find Zaxus. We'll need him for what's to come." The pieces were falling into place. Soon the galaxy would tremble at the might of a resurgent Adosian empire. The Terran Confederation's intelligence network crackled with urgent reports. Ambassador Reed's eyes widened as he scanned the incoming data, his face paling with each passing second. "Admiral Vaxon," he called, his voice tight with tension, You need to see this. Vaxon strode over, his brow furrowing as he absorbed the intelligence. Corax's information checks out. The hardliners are mobilizing on a massive scale. Reed nodded grimly. And Venix's new weapons are far more advanced than we anticipated. We're running out of time. In the days that followed, human-controlled space became a hive of frenzied activity. Vaxon's orders echoed across subspace channels as warships redeployed and orbital defense platforms were hastily constructed. Civilian transports ferried supplies and personnel to key strategic locations, their holds packed to bursting. On the bridge of the Invictus, Vaxon studied tactical readouts, his expression resolute. "It's not enough," he muttered. "We need more time." But time was a luxury they no longer possessed. Deep within Adoshan territory, Zaxxas stood before a sea of faces, his voice booming through massive speakers. "Too long have we cowered in fear of the human menace. Today, we reclaim our destiny." The crowd roared its approval as Zaxxas raised his fist triumphantly. In orbit above, Zara Venix oversaw the final preparations of the Adoshan Armada. Her new weapons gleamed wickedly in the harsh light of the shipyards. "All systems are go," a technician reported. "The fleet stands ready." Venix's eyes gleamed with fanatical intensity. "Then let us bring fire and vengeance to the stars." The Adoshan offensive struck like a thunderbolt from a clear sky. Human outposts and colonies blazed as Zaxxas's fleet tore through their defenses. On a dozen worlds, terrified civilians huddled in shelters as Adoshan weapons rained destruction from orbit. Admiral Vaxon's face was ashen as damage reports flooded in. "They've broken through our picket lines in multiple sectors," he growled. "We're spread too thin." Reed's fingers flew over a console as he tried desperately to open diplomatic channels. "This is madness," he hissed. "If we don't find a way to de-escalate, both our species will be decimated." But his pleas fell on deaf ears. The Adoshan High Command, drunk on their early victories, pushed forward relentlessly. As the onslaught continued, cracks began to appear in the Adoshan war machine. Venix's untested weapons started to malfunction spectacularly. On the bridge of his flagship, Zaxxas watched in horror as friendly fire tore apart his own vessels. "What's happening?" he roared, rounding on a trembling subordinate. "The new plasma cannons, sir," the officer stammered. "They're overloading. We can't control them." Vaxon seized the opportunity, marshaling his battered forces for a desperate counterattack. Human warships surged forward, their weapons blazing as they tore into the now disorganized Adoshan fleet. Space itself seemed to burn as the two armadas clashed. Missiles and energy beams crisscrossed the void, reducing mighty vessels to drifting wreckage. On 100 bridges, captains barked orders and damage control teams fought desperately to keep their ships in the fight. Ambassador Reed watched the tactical displays with growing horror. "My God," he whispered. "The casualties on both sides." Admiral Vaxon's voice was grim as he issued orders for the next phase of the counteroffensive. "We've got them on the back foot. Now we press the advantage." As the titanic struggle raged on, neither side showed any sign of backing down. The war that would shape the future of two civilizations had only just begun. The void of space erupted in a cacophony of light and fire as Admiral Vaxon's fleet executed a series of precise maneuvers. Human warships danced through the chaos, their advanced propulsion systems allowing them to outflank the lumbering Adoshan vessels. "Pattern Delta 7, Vaxon barked, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Focus fire on their port flank." A hail of torpedoes streaked across the battlefield, slamming into the weakened shields of the Adoshan ships. Explosions blossomed in the vacuum, silent but deadly. Aboard the Adoshan flagship Vengeance, Zaxxas gripped his command chair as the deck shuddered beneath him. "Status report!" "We've lost 3 cruisers, sir," a junior officer reported, his voice trembling. "The humans are picking us apart." Zaxxas snarled, banging his head on the armrest. "Where are Venix's wonder weapons? They were supposed to crush these vermin." As if in answer, a nearby Edosian battleship suddenly went dark, its weapons systems overloading in a spectacular display of electrical arcing. On the bridge of the Invictus, Ambassador Reed watched the battle unfold with a mix of awe and horror. "My God, Vaxon, your tactics are brilliant, but the cost?" Vaxon's face was a mask of unyielding commitment. "We didn't start this war, Reed, but by heaven, we'll finish it." The Admiral's eyes narrowed as he spotted an opening. "There, the Vengeance is exposed. All ships concentrate fire on these coordinates." A barrage of human torpedoes sliced through space, their guidance systems locked onto Zaxxus's flagship. The Adosian vessel's defenses crumbled under the assault, its primary weapons array erupting in a series of devastating explosions. Light years away, in the heart of Adosian territory, Commander Jax Orion led his team through the shadows of a sprawling military complex. The elite human operatives moved with fluid precision, disabling security systems and neutralizing guards with ruthless efficiency. "Charges set," Orion's second-in-command whispered over the comm. "Ready to blow on your mark." Jax allowed himself a tight smile. "Light it up." The night sky blazed as the Adosian fuel depot went up in flames. As alarms blared and chaos erupted, Jax's team melted away into the darkness, leaving destruction in their wake. Similar scenes played out across Adosian space as human strike teams wreaked havoc on supply lines and command centers. With each successful raid, cracks in the Adosian war machine widened. In the halls of power on the Adosian homeworld, tensions reached a boiling point. Zara Venix stormed into a high-level strategy meeting, her eyes blazing with fury. "Your incompetence is costing us everything," she spat at Zaxxus. "My weapons could have won this war if you hadn't squandered them with your ham-fisted tactics." Zaxxus rose to his full height, looming over the scientist. "Watch your tongue, Venix. Your precious toys have proven as unreliable as they are flashy." As the two hardliners clashed, moderate voices like Korax began to whisper of alternatives. Underground resistance cells spread word of the true costs of the war, fueling growing discontent among the populace. The final straw came when Venix stumbled upon evidence of Zaxxus's secret bioweapon program. Horrified by the implications, she reached out to her moderate contacts, setting in motion events that would shake the foundations of Adosian society. With both sides pushed to the brink, the unthinkable became reality. Planet-killer missiles arced through space, mass driver cannons pounded worlds to dust, and entire star systems became uninhabitable in the blink of an eye. Admiral Vaxon, his face haggard from weeks of relentless combat, issued the order for a final all-out assault on the Adosian capital. As human and Adosian fleets gathered for one last cataclysmic battle, the fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. The skies above the Adosian capital blazed with the fury of two civilizations locked in mortal combat. Human and Adosian ships danced a deadly waltz, energy beams and missiles crisscrossing the void. On the bridge of the Invictus, Admiral Vaxon's eyes never left the tactical display as he orchestrated the final assault. "Bravo Squadron, punch through their flank," he commanded. "Echo Team, prepare for boarding action on the Vengeance." As the words left his mouth, a blinding flash erupted from the Adosian flagship. Its primary reactor had gone critical, torn apart by sustained human bombardment. The massive vessel listed to port, venting atmosphere and debris. "Sir, we're detecting multiple escape pods launching from the Vengeance," a sensor officer reported. Vaxon's eyes narrowed. "Intercept those pods. Zaxxus must not escape." Across the battlefield, human strike teams swarmed Adosian vessels, their advanced powered armor allowing them to shrug off energy blasts that would have vaporized unprotected soldiers. Commander Jax Orion led the charge onto the crippled Vengeance, his team cutting through bulkheads with plasma torches. "Zaxxus spotted on Deck 7, Orion's second-in-command reported over the comm. "He's making for the auxiliary hangar." "Not on my watch," Orion growled, sprinting down a smoke-filled corridor. The human commandos cornered Zaxxus as he attempted to board the last remaining shuttle. The Adosian warlord snarled defiance, raising an ornate energy pistol. Orion's team didn't hesitate, their coordinated fire dropping Zaxxus before he could squeeze off a shot. As Zaxxus was dragged away in restraints, the news of his capture spread like wildfire through the Adosian ranks. Entire battle groups began to waver, their purpose crumbling in the face of their leader's defeat. On the Adoshan homeworld, Zara Venix watched the unfolding disaster with a mix of horror and grim satisfaction. She had warned them of the humans' true capabilities, but the hardliners' arrogance had known no bounds. Now they would all pay the price. Venix's comm unit chirped urgently. It was Korax, his voice tight with tension. "Zara, it's time. The moderates are mobilizing. Will you stand with us?" She hesitated only a moment before replying, "I'm on my way." As Venix slipped out of her laboratory, alarms began to blare throughout the capital. The fragile alliance of hardliner factions was shattering, each group scrambling to secure power in the vacuum left by Zaxxus's fall. In orbit, Admiral Vaxon sensed the shift in the tide of battle. He keyed his comm, opening a channel to all human forces. "This is it, people. Push forward with everything we've got. Today, we end this war." The human armada surged forward, their weapons blazing as they tore through the disorganized Adosian defenses. One by one, the core worlds of the Adosian Empire fell to Vaxon's relentless assault. On the conquered planets, Jax Orion and his strike teams worked tirelessly, securing critical infrastructure and hunting down hardliner holdouts. They moved with clockwork precision, guided by the intelligence Venix had provided. As human forces pressed deeper into Adoshan territory, Ambassador Reed found himself grappling with the magnitude of the destruction. Entire cities lay in ruins, reduced to smoking craters by orbital bombardments. The stench of death hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder of the cost of victory. "Was there truly no other way?" Reed murmured, surveying the devastation from the viewport of his shuttle. His musings were interrupted by an urgent transmission from Vaxon. "Ambassador, we've detected a massive energy buildup in the Zeth core system. It appears the remaining hardliners have fallen back to a fortified redoubt." Reed's blood ran cold as he absorbed the implications. "Dear God, they're going to make a last stand." As the human fleet massed for the final push, a chilling message crackled across all frequencies. The face of Zaxxara, Zaxxus's fanatical second-in-command, filled view screens throughout the armada. "Humans!" she spat, her eyes burning with hatred. "You may have broken our armies, but you will never break our spirit. If we cannot have our empire, then none shall have it." The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by sensor readings that made even the most hardened veterans blanch. Zaxxara had unleashed a nightmarish bioweapon, a mutagenic plague that spread with terrifying speed across human-occupied Adoshan colonies. Admiral Vaxon's face was ashen as he processed the reports flooding in. Millions were already dead or dying, their bodies twisting into horrific new forms as the pathogen rewrote their very DNA. "We have no choice," Vaxon said, his voice heavy with the weight of command. "Initiate Protocol Omega. Sterilize the infected zones." As human warships rained fire upon the plague-stricken worlds, Vaxon turned his attention to the hardliner redoubt. The final battle for the fate of two civilizations was about to begin. The dust of battle had barely settled when the Terran Confederation's war machine shifted gears. Admiral Vaxon's fleet, still bearing the scars of their hard-fought victory, fanned out across Adoshan space. Warships became mobile customs checkpoints. Boarding parties transformed into impromptu demolition squads. On the bridge of the Invictus, Vaxon watched as feeds from a dozen worlds flickered across his tactical display. Adosian defense platforms crumbled under precisely targeted fire, their fragments drifting into planetary orbits. On the surfaces below, task forces methodically cataloged and dismantled weapons caches. "Sir, we've secured the Zeth core shipyards," a junior officer reported. "Engineering teams are stripping them of anything that could be repurposed for military use." Vaxon nodded, his face etched with grim satisfaction. "Good. Make sure those antimatter containment units are transported with utmost care. We don't need any accidents." Meanwhile, in the cavernous halls of what was once the Adoshan High Command, Ambassador Reed presided over a very different sort of conquest. The circular chamber, its vaulted ceiling still scorched from the final assault, now played host to a gathering of broken empires. Korax, flanked by a handful of shell-shocked Adosian moderates, sat across from Reed. The ambassador's datapad displayed a list of demands that seemed to stretch endlessly. The Sirius cluster, including all orbital facilities and mining operations, will be ceded to Terran control, Reed stated, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. Furthermore, the Rigel Betelgeuse trade corridor will be open to unrestricted human traffic. Corax's facial tendrils twitched in barely suppressed anger. "You ask too much, human. Our people will starve without—" Reed cut him off with a wave. "Your people should have considered that before launching an unprovoked war of aggression. Now, shall we discuss the military installations we'll be establishing on your core worlds, or would you prefer to take a recess?" As the grueling negotiations dragged on, a sleek diplomatic shuttle pierced Kalara Prime's atmosphere. Its passenger, newly appointed Governor General Elias Kane, strode down the landing ramp with the confidence of a conqueror. Kane's first act was to requisition the sprawling compound that had once housed Edoshan's Ministry of Science. Within hours, a small army of human bureaucrats swarmed the building, setting up the nerve center of the occupation government. "I want oversight on every power plant, every refinery, every damn farm on this rock," Kane barked to his assembled staff. "If it moves, track it. If it produces, tax it. If it resists—" His eyes gleamed with cold purpose. "Crush it." As Kane's iron grip tightened, unrest simmered beneath the surface of Edosian society. In the crowded slums of Nexus City, a group of former soldiers huddled around a makeshift comm unit. Their leader, a grizzled veteran named Thax, listened intently to scattered reports of human troop movements. "They've left the spaceport's western approach lightly guarded," Thax growled. "We strike at dawn, for Edosia." The guerrilla war erupted with savage intensity. Human patrols found themselves ambushed in narrow streets, their advanced armor providing little protection against improvised plasma charges. Occupation officials' shuttles were shot down with alarming regularity. The human response was swift and merciless. Orbital strikes reduced entire city blocks to rubble at the slightest hint of insurgent activity. Kane's enforcers conducted house-to-house searches, dragging away anyone suspected of harboring rebel sympathies. In the chaos of one such raid, a young human lieutenant named Kane Hallstrom stumbled upon a scene that would haunt him for years to come. The village of Zarakesh lay in smoldering ruins, its inhabitants massacred in a display of overwhelming force. As Hallstrom's unit swept the area, a small sound caught his attention. Huddled beneath the twisted wreckage of what might have been a school, he found her, a young Edosian girl, her eyes wide with terror and grief. "It's okay," Hallstrom said softly, holstering his weapon. "I won't hurt you." The girl, later identified as Ilea, remained mute as Hallstrom carried her to safety. In the days that followed, she communicated only through haunting sketches, stick figures engulfed in flames, monstrous shapes looming over cowering forms. As Ilea's drawings circulated through human channels, a growing unease settled over the occupation forces. Soldiers whispered of the atrocities they'd witnessed, of orders that pushed the boundaries of decency. Meanwhile, Kane's grand plans for reshaping Edosian society began to crumble under their own weight. Human-designed factories stood idle, their alien workforces struggling to adapt to unfamiliar technologies. Edosian farmers, forced to abandon traditional cultivation methods, watched helplessly as crop yields plummeted. In the corridors of power, human officials indulged in increasingly brazen displays of corruption. Choice contracts were awarded to cronies, while vital reconstruction projects languished in bureaucratic limbo. As resentment festered on both sides, the seeds of a new conflict took root. In hidden bunkers and secret meetings, a resurgent Edosian resistance began to coalesce. They whispered of a day when the chains of human oppression would be cast off, when Edosia would rise again. The acrid stench of burning plastics and charred flesh hung heavy in the air as Governor General Elias Kane surveyed the smoldering ruins of what had once been the thriving Edosian settlement of Nixthal. His cold eyes swept over the devastation, lips curled in a mirthless smile. "Another nest of insurgents eradicated," he declared to his assembled staff. "Let this serve as a lesson to any who would defy Terran authority." Lieutenant Kane Hallstrom fought to keep his face neutral, but his stomach churned at the carnage surrounding them. The scorched earth tactics Kane had unleashed were growing more brutal by the day. Entire communities reduced to ash on the flimsiest pretext of harboring rebels. As Kane's entourage departed, Hallstrom lingered behind. He knelt beside the twisted wreckage of an Adosian dwelling, running his gloved hand over a child's toy half buried in the rubble. The charred plastic crumbled at his touch. "This isn't right," he muttered, unaware he had spoken aloud until a gruff voice responded. "No, it isn't." Hallstrom whirled, hand flying to his sidearm, only to find himself face to face with a grizzled sergeant. The older man's eyes were hard, but there was understanding in them. "Keep thoughts like that to yourself, Lieutenant," the sergeant warned. "You never know who might be listening." As news of Kane's atrocities spread, outrage ignited among both humans and Adosians. In the teeming slums of Nexus City, a young resistance fighter named Joran Kaliz addressed a clandestine gathering of insurgents. "For too long, we have suffered under the boot of human oppression," Kaliz proclaimed, his voice resonating with passionate intensity. "But no more. The time has come to show these invaders that Adosia will never be truly conquered." Cheers erupted from the assembled crowd. Kaliz allowed himself a small smile before continuing. "Our next target will be the fuel depots at New Anchorage. Without those supplies, Kane's war machine will grind to a halt." As Kaliz outlined the daring raid, a figure watched from the shadows. Naira Thek, once a respected legislator in the Adosian government, studied the young rebel leader with a mixture of admiration and concern. His passion was undeniable, but she feared the consequences of further escalation. Across the galaxy, in the sterile corridors of Terran Confederation headquarters, Ambassador Reed paced anxiously. The latest reports from occupied Adosian space scrolled across his datapad, each new atrocity sending a fresh wave of nausea through him. "This has to stop," Reed muttered, running a hand through his thinning hair. With a deep breath, he keyed his comm unit. "Get me a secure line to Admiral Vaxon. It's time we put an end to Kane's madness." Hours later, Reed found himself locked in heated debate with Vaxon and the Confederation's top brass. The Admiral's face was a mask of terrifying fury as he slammed a fist on the conference table. "You can't be serious, Reed," Vaxon roared. "The insurgency is gaining ground every day. We need to hit them harder, not capitulate to their demands." Reed met Vaxon's glare with steely persistence. "And how many more innocent lives are you willing to sacrifice in this crusade, Admiral? Kane's brutality is creating more rebels than it eliminates. We need a new approach." As the argument raged on, light years away, Joran Kaliz's strike team infiltrated the New Anchorage fuel depot. They moved with practiced efficiency, placing demolition charges at key structural points. Kaliz's heart raced as he armed the final explosive. This would be their most ambitious operation yet, a blow that would resonate across the entire sector. As he turned to signal the withdrawal, a familiar face emerged from the shadows. "Impressive work, young one," Zara Venix said, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of pride and regret. "But I fear this attack may have graver consequences than you realize." Kaliz tensed, hand inching towards his weapon. "How did you find us? Why are you here?" Venix raised her hands in a placating gesture. "I'm here to help. The information I can provide could turn the tide of this conflict. But first, we need to get out of here before—" Her words were cut short by the wail of proximity alarms. Kaliz cursed under his breath. "We've been compromised. Everyone, fall back to the extraction point." As chaos erupted around them, neither Kaliz nor Venix noticed the shadowy figure observing from a nearby catwalk. The mercenary raised a hand to his ear, activating a secure comm channel. "Target acquired," he reported coldly. "Permission to engage?" Admiral Vaxon's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Negative. Track and report only. We need to identify the entire cell before we move. But soon—" The Admiral's tone darkened. "Soon we'll crush this insurgency once and for all." The fragile piece shattered with a blinding flash. Admiral Vaxon's flagship rocked violently as Kane's renegade fleet materialized from hyperspace, weapons blazing. Caught off guard over the Killian shipyards, Vaxon's armada suffered catastrophic losses in the opening salvo. Shields down to 30%, an officer shouted as klaxons blared. Multiple hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. Vaxon gripped the command console, his face a mask of fury. Return fire! All batteries! Target that dreadnought! But it was too late. Kane's ambush had done its work. As Vaxon watched in horror, a third of his fleet erupted into expanding clouds of debris. Light years away, Ambassador Reed ducked as a plasma bolt seared past his head, leaving a smoking hole in the wall behind him. His security detail swarmed around him, returning fire at the black-clad assassins that had infiltrated his compound. This way, sir! A guard shouted, gesturing towards an emergency exit. Reed sprinted down the corridor, the sounds of battle echoing behind him. As Reed's shuttle rocketed away from the burning complex, reports flooded in from across human space. Kane's forces, bolstered by treachery and deception, seized control of key worlds with ruthless efficiency. The renegade governor's propaganda machine kicked into overdrive, flooding the airwaves with manufactured atrocities blamed on Edosian insurgents. In the shadows of a ruined Edosian city, Joran Kaliz watched the human civil war unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and apprehension. He turned to his inner circle, eyes gleaming with newfound purpose. This is our chance, Kaliz declared. While the humans tear themselves apart, we strike, but not alone. He activated a holoprojector, revealing Ambassador Reed's haggard face. It's time to forge an alliance that will shake the stars themselves. Days later, a daring raid rocked one of Kane's planetary garrisons. Human and Edosian fighters moved in perfect synchronization, their weapons cutting through the renegade's defenses like scythes through wheat. As alarms blared, a familiar figure led the assault, Lieutenant Kane Hallstrom, his face set in fierce dedication as he fought alongside his former enemies. Kane's response was swift and brutal. Orbital bombardments rained fire upon civilian populations, Edosian and human alike. The indiscriminate slaughter only fueled the resistance, driving more to Kaliz and Reed's banner with each passing day. In a secret laboratory deep beneath the Edosian capital, Zara Venix stood before a group of newly liberated scientists. Her eyes blazed with intensity as she outlined their vital mission. Gentlemen, she began, our work here will turn the tide of this war, but more importantly, it will expose Kane for the monster he truly is. As Venix spoke, holographic displays flickered to life, revealing schematics for terrifying bioweapons and damning evidence of Kane's illicit arms deals during the occupation. The scientists' expressions hardened with persistence, their fingers flying over consoles as they began their grim work. Admiral Vaxon's battered fleet limped into the orbit of an allied alien world, its hull scarred and blackened. On the bridge, Vaxon and Reed stood before a gathering of alien dignitaries, their faces etched with desperation. We don't ask this lightly, Reed implored, but the threat Kane poses extends far beyond humanity. If he isn't stopped, the entire galaxy will burn. The aliens exchanged worried glances, but one by one, they nodded their assent. As Reed breathed a sigh of relief, a proximity alert blared. On the main view screen, a massive fleet of Allied warships dropped out of hyperspace, their weapons primed and ready. Vaxon allowed himself a grim smile. Now, he growled, we take the fight to Kane. The combined armada surged forward, clashing with Kane's forces in a series of brutal engagements that raged across multiple star systems. Planets burned and fleets shattered as the two sides threw everything they had at each other. In the chaos of battle, a small ship slipped past the renegades' defensive lines. Inside, Joran Kaliz and Zara Venix prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. Their target, Governor General Kane himself. As they neared their destination, Kaliz's comm unit crackled to life. A familiar voice, tinged with static and urgency, came through. This is Lieutenant Hallstrom, the message began. I've uncovered Kane's endgame. He's preparing to unleash something called Armageddon weapons. We're out of time. Kaliz and Venix exchanged grim looks as their ship plunged towards the surface of a ravaged frontier world. Whatever Kane had planned, they knew the fate of two species, and perhaps the entire galaxy, now hung in the balance. The surface of the ravaged frontier world loomed large in the view screen as Kaliz and Venix's ship plunged through the atmosphere. Flames licked at the hull as they hurtled towards their target, Governor General Kane's hidden fortress. "We're picking up massive energy signatures," Venix reported, her fingers dancing across the sensor controls. "Whatever these Armageddon weapons are, they're powering up now." Kaliz gritted his teeth. "Then we're out of time. Prepare for a hot landing." The ship screamed towards the surface, anti-aircraft fire erupting around them in deadly blossoms. At the last moment, Kaliz wrenched the controls, sending them skidding across a barren plain. The hull shrieked as it tore through rock and soil before grinding to a halt. Smoke filled the cockpit as Kaliz and Venix stumbled out, weapons at the ready. In the distance, a massive citadel of black metal rose from the desolate landscape. Swarms of fighters filled the sky above it. "There!" Venix pointed to a hangar bay, its force field flickering as ships launched. "If we can get inside—" Her words were cut short as the ground shook violently. A blinding pillar of energy erupted from the citadel's central spire, lancing into the sky. The clouds above parted, revealing the terrible scope of the orbital battle raging overhead. Kaliz watched in horror as the energy beam struck an Allied cruiser. The massive ship simply disintegrated, scattering into a cloud of subatomic particles. "By the void," he breathed. "We have to stop this, now." They sprinted across the battlefield, dodging strafing runs and artillery fire. As they neared the hangar, a familiar figure emerged from the smoke. Lieutenant Hallstrom, his uniform torn and bloodied. "Cutting it close," Hallstrom grunted, tossing Kaliz a data chip. "That's everything I could find on Kane's weapon systems. We've got maybe 10 minutes before he can fire again." Inside the citadel was chaos. Alarms blared as soldiers and technicians rushed to battle stations. The trio fought their way through, following Hallstrom's intel to the central control room. They burst through the reinforced doors to find Kane hunched over a glowing console, his face illuminated by holographic displays of the battle above. "You're too late," Kane snarled, not bothering to turn. "The weapon is charged. One more shot and your pathetic alliance will shatter." Kaliz raised his weapon. "It's over, Kane! Shut it down!" The renegade governor whirled, a manic gleam in his eyes. "You still don't understand, do you? This was never about mere conquest. The Armageddon array will rewrite the very fabric of space-time. Humanity will be elevated to godhood." Venix's eyes widened as she scanned the readouts. "He's mad. This level of power, it could tear a hole in reality itself." Kane laughed, a sound devoid of sanity. "Precisely. And from the ashes of this universe, a new order will arise, with humanity as its masters." His hand reached for the firing controls. Kaliz and Hallstrom opened fire, their shots deflected by a shimmering personal shield. Kane's fingers closed on the activation switch. A blinding flash filled the room. When it faded, Kane lay crumpled on the floor, a smoking hole in his chest. Venix stood over him, her weapon still raised. "For Adosha," she whispered. "For everyone you murdered." Alarms screamed as the weapon system began to overload. Venix rushed to the controls, her fingers flying as she tried to avert catastrophe. "It's no use," she shouted. "The fail-safes are gone. This whole complex is going to detonate." Hallstrom grabbed her arm. "Then we run, now." They sprinted through collapsing corridors as the citadel shook itself apart around them. They barely made it to Kaliz's battered ship before the first explosions rocked the surface. As they clawed for altitude, the Armageddon array detonated. A titanic fireball consumed the horizon, the shockwave nearly swatting them from the sky. When the blinding light faded, nothing remained of Kane's fortress but a smoking crater. In the aftermath, as the fires of war slowly guttered out across the galaxy, an uneasy peace settled over human and Edosian space. The true work of rebuilding had only just begun.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.